Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. At City Year, we really believe in fostering spaces for conversations on difficult topics. It's through sharing our life experiences, discussing these tough topics that we as a community are able to come together, find solutions, and learn from one another. So my name is Allie Knox. I served in City Year Detroit in the 2018-2019 school year in a third grade class. It was an extremely rewarding experience both personally and professionally, just a lot of growth all around. And I think that that's kind of what attributed to me sticking around for a while. So they couldn't shake me yet, so I had to decide to come on as a recruiter. Now I recruit at a couple schools here in Michigan, but really, really just happy to be a part of the program still, really lucky to be here. So as we get started, I wanted to be sure that we do not claim to be experts on bias or equity, but as a part of a commitment to the community, we do aim to facilitate conversations like this as an opportunity to foster equity in our own lives and within the schools that we serve. So why are we here today? We know at City Year that 4% of school districts in the country produce over 50% of non-high school graduates. And like Detroit, those schools predominantly serve Black and Latinx students. So this is where racial and educational equity intersect, and this is the problem that City Year seeks to address. So real quick, for those who are not familiar with City Year, we're an education-based nonprofit powered by AmeriCorps. We operate in 29 cities across the United States, and what we do is we place teams of young, diverse individuals from 18 to 25 into urban, systemically under-resourced public schools, where they work there full-time all year as a tutor, mentor, and role model to kids in grades 3 through 9. So for example, in Detroit, a team of core members serve at one of our partner schools within DPSCD, or Detroit Public School Community District, for the entire year. Core members work side by side with teachers, providing whole school and whole classroom support, as well as targeted interventions to students who need extra help in their attendance, their behavior, or their course performance. So for our core members, it's not only after school, it's not just once a week, it is all day, every day that they're working in these schools. So they're like that consistent and caring presence for the students. No matter what's going on outside of the school, the students know that when they come to school, there will be a smiling City Year core member there to say that today will be a great day. So that's a little bit about City Year, but now I would actually like to introduce our two incredibly special people who have joined us today to give their own perspective on the state of equity and education. The first one is Tonya Adair, who is the Chief People, Equity, and Engagement Officer of United Way for Southeastern Michigan and serves on our City Year Detroit's board. And then Anaya Johnson, who is an AmeriCorps alumni who served with City Year Detroit in the 2020-2021 school year. So I'd love to give them a moment to introduce themselves with their name, their connection to City Year, their current position, and then what gives them a unique perspective on this topic of equity within education. So Tonya, I'll pass it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Allie. My name is Tonya Adair, as she has stated. I work for United Way for Southeastern Michigan, and I'm a City Year board member. I'm also a longtime advocate for City Year. I have a background in education. I spent 26 years in education in Louisiana, as well as in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I served as a teacher, assistant principal, a high school principal that begged for City Year to be at my school, but it never happened, as well as chief innovation officer and chief academic officer prior to leaving. We worked very closely with United Way, which is how I was introduced to United Way. But in my role as chief innovation officer, I was an advocate for City Year, but also sat as proxy on the board for Dr. Hudson, who was my superintendent at the time, as well as I was responsible for the City Year contract and meeting with the leaders of City Year on a regular basis, and as well as the core members, just to ensure that things were going smoothly at our schools. So that's who I am. I also did a year of a City Year district leadership program along with the leader of City Year in Milwaukee, and we traveled with other City Year leaders and learning more about inequities, learning more about how to address absenteeism and other inequities within schools. So almost forgot that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. I'll throw it over to Anaya if you want to tell us a little bit about your name, your connection to City or Detroit, current position, and then again, what gives you a unique perspective on this topic.
I'm not nearly as accomplished as my panel counterpart, so there. But my name is Anaya Johnson. I served with City Year Detroit in the 2020-2021 school year, and that was our virtual year. That alone, I would say, is probably my most substantial qualification about seeing inequity up close and personal. And then from there, I am an aspiring attorney, child advocacy attorney, and hopefully diplomat later on down the line. And so my entire life, I've known this. So I have been in programs, organizations. I sit on the board of directors for Creating a Healthy Community here in Metro Detroit. I am currently for simpler terms of my title, a behavior dean, focusing on redirection and modification in elementary through high schools and Hartford Woods.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again to both of you for being here. So I would like to just get us started with some questions here. So Tonya, if you don't mind, can you briefly just level set for us? Can you explain what systemic inequity is?
Absolutely. When you think about systemic inequities, it typically refers to education and social systems that are really deeply rooted and designed to benefit only certain groups of people. It perpetuates the oppression of specific racial groups through policies and laws and practices that negatively impact specific racial demographics, including Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color in general, and people experiencing poverty. These are deep-rooted issues that even when you think you've solved one problem, you uncover layers and layers of bad decision-making, layers of oppression, and layers of disparities that were intentionally designed in most cases, in some cases ignorantly designed. So COVID really revealed grave disparities and inequities that existed within some of our systems, including healthcare and education systems. In education, for instance, we saw firsthand that educating students demands something more. It demands a little bit more than what we were requiring. Teachers are underpaid and under-equipped. They're some of the lowest paid individuals across the nation, but they're the most needed. With the tools, they're unequipped with the tools needed, even during a major crisis. But we needed them to do even more during the pandemic, and we required them to do even more. We quickly learned that a scripted curriculum and grades meant absolutely nothing, especially in schools where there were few qualified teachers, which were mainly public schools. One of the things that stood out to me during the pandemic and that I learned early on is many affluent school districts, they never stopped in-person learning. They kept going. And students kept learning the way they had been learning before, even though things were going on around them. It didn't really affect them as much. But all of our struggling school districts were shut down, and people had to scramble to find even technology needed to re-engage students and the means to help shift in this grave situation. And so that lifted an inequity that, again, layers and layers and layers of oppressions and decision-making and inequities across the nation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think you mentioned that below all of those layers, that's kind of what is creating these inequities within education. So we have to kind of strip back and see, what's at the bottom of this. And if we just think for a second to put it within like one sentence, what would you say is at the bottom? What is creating these inequities? Just one quick, where does it all start from?
I don't know if we have a quick, but it starts with funding structures and generations of underinvestments in infrastructure and talent and resources. those are only a few issues that are creating the inequities in education.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for both of those answers. So Anaya, I wanted to ask you, as a City or AmeriCorps alumni, you have a very valuable and unique perspective with regards to equity, racial justice, cultural competency, excuse me, all of the above. So one, why did you choose to serve in City or Detroit for specifically? And then what did you see on the ground in terms of inequities on a daily basis? And what were the impacts of those inequities?
Thank you, Allie. So, trying to find a short version, because I know my core family knows a lot more about the long version of why I decided to serve. I would say the pandemic became a bittersweet divine intervention type of moment in time for me, whereas I was graduating from Washington University in St. Louis. And at the time, I knew I wanted to take a gap year before I started law school. However, I was unsure of what I wanted that gap year to consist of. And I went out for a couple of interviews in different business and organizations. And it just seemed like it was going to be a job. And then I had talked to Teach for America, and it just didn't seem like I wanted to quite commit to 2 years of taking off of time. And then one of my counselors suggested that I check out City Year because they were coming back at a school fair. And I was actually taking some of my mentees around the fair to show them what it was like to give out your resumes and take business cards. And I ended up talking for about an hour with my recruiter, who was in the St. Louis area at the time. And I loved what she gained from her experience. And so I decided to hear more about it. And as the pandemic continued on, I had actually accepted a job offer in Florida, in Miami, and I was going to go. But then when offices closed, they said they were not going to bring on any new recruits. And so I had to reevaluate what that meant for my life in that moment. And I had come home for the time being. I was raised here in Detroit, and I went to private schools all my life. And so I knew the benefit of having a valuable education, an education where people care and where they're going to pour into you. And when I talked to those recruiters in Detroit about what specific needs were needed, because my mother instilled in me very young, you take care of home first. And so at the time I thought that I was going to go to Miami or I was going to go to Orlando still. And I took a moment and I took a breath and I decided that if there was going to be anyone I could relate to, it would be the youth of Detroit. And I knew that as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and as a legacy, I was bred to serve. And this is exactly following in my founder's footsteps of education. And it just made sense to me. And then from the very moment that I started to meet different core members, or before we were officially core members, and getting to talk out different things about our interest and our range of aspirations, it just made it very clear that there aren't I'll say on one tip, that it wasn't as many people who looked like me, but also who were from my hometown, that was willing to serve in this capacity. And then secondly, that you need people from a lot of various different backgrounds to make a stride in the way that I would hope the world and society moves forward in the future. And then I'll say on the front of what we see on a daily basis, I think the pandemic brought to the forefront a lot of things that have been swept under the rug for a very long time. Particularly in Detroit is what I knew, but across the nation, we were seeing things that were very broadly known, but weren't being acted on. And at this point, from like technology, from the issues of, I think within my first week, I was teaching students how to send an email, because this was something that we realized they weren't doing their work, or they weren't being able to sign on to classes. And it was like, they're either at home where they don't have the resources, or they don't know how to connect to the resources, or they also are in environments where there's not many people who could also help them, because they also needed the teaching and learning of the technology of, especially starting high school. I was a ninth grade ELA social studies and science core member. So in the high school space, this is a new space. It was very also troubling to see a lot of times people, what they aspire or what they think high school is going to be, what ninth grade year is meant to be, and what the reality of that year was that, sorry, bells going off, but that it's different. It's going to be different, but that we still have to make the most of it. And then teachers seeing where the gaps are, and how their time is getting cut short, and how there's a shortage, and what that means for our students, and what impact that has on them and the community as a whole, where you have students who are not fully in class, or aren't steadily being able to get the help that they need because classes have been cut to 40 to 45 minutes instead of an hour. And teachers have to continue moving because you can't spend 3 weeks on one topic. And knowing where core members then fill in those gaps in the after school programs, in our study halls, or in our pullouts. These are all moments where we can find and identify the very specific needs of students and then move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And you said it was a divine intervention, and I think City of Detroit agrees with that. So we're happy to, have gotten you to serve with us. We're very, very thankful. So thank you for answering that. Tonya, I was actually wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the inequities within our society reflect and influence like educational inequity.
Sure, our schools really are a mirror of our priorities. We all make investments based on what we prioritize and lift up. For instance, I know, a mother who is actually was recently employed at United Way in our call center, and she prioritized her child getting an education because she didn't have that opportunity. And she made sure that everything she did was to get her child through the best schools. She had her go to Howard University and recently graduated. But all of this, everything that she did, every part of her being was about making sure her child graduated from college. And she graduated just this year from Howard University. So the systems that we designed are created based on our priorities. And the systems are only produce what they are designed to produce. And what we have currently is a result of intentional choices and decisions compounded over time based on a system that was not created for everybody. And when we see the system that was not created for everybody, and the layers and layers of inequities that have occurred over time, and having a voice and having an opportunity to come in and truly make a difference is something that we strive to do. I know for me, when I was in, a principal, and I mentioned earlier wanting City to come in, is because I knew without a doubt that that would be the help that I needed to get my students over the hump. I took on a school where I had to combine 2 schools into one. 50% of those students were overaged and under-credentialed. That means they had been at the schools 3-4 years, but they were still freshmen and didn't even realize it. So having somebody to come in and work with the students would have been a major accomplishment for me, but I did have volunteers. I ended up with volunteers that ended up doing that and helped me to change the culture of that school. And I also had City Year to come in and do a service day and help change the atmosphere even. But just those little rays of sunshine for students, and that allows them to see that there's somebody that cares for them, somebody that has hope for them, and somebody that's here to help them get them over a certain hump so that they can also be successful in society was really, really something that I wanted to make sure that I did for my students, and I was able to do that. And the systems that were created, they were created for failures and successes. And so when we think about how much systems are designed for only a few, but when we break down those barriers to make sure that the multitude can take advantage of opportunities is what we really strive to do. And I know that that's what City of Core members help schools to do as well.
Yeah, definitely. Being that intentional support within the schools, definitely. So going on from that, Anaya, if you could tell us a little bit about that intentional support, what was your role creating educational equity as a City or Core member?
Of course. That is such a beautiful phrase, like intentional support. I think that really sums up the majority of what we do. But I will also say that we look at the whole child, and then we understand that we are just a part of their village, and we try to bring in the full village to make sure that that child is successful, and each child has a different approach. I personally had 16 on my focus list. And so I had one of the larger numbers amongst the core, but it was particularly very important for me. Like, I also was our social emotional learning coordinator for my team, where everything that is academic also needs a personal touch. You have to understand what the child is going through to be able to relate to them, to get them to focus, to get them passionate about what they're learning. And also understanding, quite frankly, a lot of times what I ran into was that things are going to be outdated. Things are going to be just another strain of the inequities that are produced with the schools that City Year works with, is that they don't always have the top of the line resources, and that sometimes you have to come up with things on the spot, or sometimes you have to prepare for that ahead of time to make sure that they're still getting the full education that they deserve. And sometimes that does mean, like, okay, do we want to talk about what a homecoming is, what that means, what that would have been like, what do we want to work towards a goal like field day if we get all of our work done? And sometimes it's a little bit more serious, where I've had students who have lost parents and who have lost siblings, and they are dealing with that, but they haven't told anyone that. And so that comes out when we're reading about what it means to be an American, or when you're writing about the 20th century. And so these are things that I learned how to incorporate into the lessons, or into our focus sessions, but as well as simple, like, follow through Fridays was something that we really worked through in our science classes. And then in our history classes, they know I'm a meme fanatic. And I love GIFs. So that was something that on Teams, they have a whole catalog that you can choose from. So every morning, if you're sitting with Ms. Naya in the classroom, I need to know how you're feeling. Give me a 1 to 5. Hands up. Let me see. Are we here today? Are we present? Did you just log on? These are things I need to see your faces, like really pushing for things that not only just, like, in the essence of it, yes, I do want to see your face to make sure you're here, but I'm also trying to see, are you retaining what I'm giving? Are you understanding what, and I actually happen to be partnered with one of my partner teachers' name was Miss Johnson as well. So we tag team, like, all right, number 1's gonna take it, number 2's gonna take it. Are you here with us? Are you there with us? Are we gonna do a breakout? And understanding that school might be draining sometimes, because you do have to put in a little bit of extra work, especially when it was virtual. And yes, I know you're on the computer a lot, and that you don't get a lot of time to socialize, and finding those areas as well. When can we allow for them to play a game, maybe a Kahoot, maybe a Wordle, like, get them to submit things that would then they could visually see and collaborate on, or have some type of competition with. And finding those little gaps, and also working very strategically with your partner teachers, was I'm sorry, I'm getting very excited. Just remembering back of like how beautiful the system works when you have a whole village that is ingrained, and also knowing that like a call home does not mean that you're in trouble. And so I had many parents who would like call back or email the school like, hey, I got a call from, and like, no, actually that was a heads up. That was like your student turned in all the work on time, or I just love seeing how energetic your student was in class this morning, bright and early. I loved how your student helped other students today, and like knowing that you have a balance of those things, but also, hey, I didn't notice they were in class today, or hey, I just wanted to check in and make sure that I saw one twin, I didn't see the other twin. Are these things that we, you know, like things that you pick up on, because a lot of times it is a lot of background work, and you only get to directly work with very specific students, but you're also in the classroom more often than you're in your focus sessions. So noticing things that maybe a teacher won't have time to do, especially if they're sharing their screen so they can't see the comments. I'm like a chat whiz. I'm like, even on my committees now, like I'm always in the chat. I'm making sure we're getting questions. I'm rewriting things that maybe you didn't catch or you didn't see it on the board, screenshots. I'm quick with them so that you have what you need when the day is over, or when we close out of that class. And that's what I feel like core members are. They're literally to help make sure that there's a bridge over the gap so that you don't fall through.
It is amazing. Your students are so lucky to have you. Just every time you talk about them, like, and your service here, it really shines through how passionately you feel about these students. And again, Detroit, your students very, very lucky to have you. So moving on a little bit, Tonya, if you don't mind telling us, in your opinion, who's responsible for solving educational inequity?
Right now it's Anaya. She's amazing. Truly amazing. And I know that there's so many core members like her in Detroit and others. So this is just wonderful. But it takes everyone. It really does. It's a system that touches every person. Every person pays in. Every person participates in some way. At somehow, you know, at some point of your life, everyone engages in some way. Our roles may look different, certainly, but there is most definitely a role for everyone. There's a quote by W.E.B. Du Bois that says, we should measure the prosperity of a nation not by the number of millionaires, but by the absence of poverty, the prevalence of health, the efficiency of the public schools, and the number of people who can and do read worthwhile books. And then thinking about that quote, I made sure I wrote that down and planted it here so I can get to it. But it's one that resonated with me, because prosperity right now in our country, sometimes it seems like prosperity belongs to only a few. Poverty is at an all-time high. In Michigan alone, 40% of families struggle to meet their basic needs. And in cities like Detroit and Hamtramck and Pontiac, the number is more like 70% of families. And if we don't all pay attention to that, if we don't all step up to the plate and come together, solving the layers of inequity will require educators, community members, policymakers, nonprofit leaders, corporate leaders, everyone working together to dismantle the systems of oppression that students are dealing with, and removing those barriers to progression, and remaining diligent and faithful, because it's not going to be easy. It's not an easy task. Many of us have been at this for years. It's not something that is going to happen overnight, but we have to remain diligent. We have to know that until everyone is free from oppression, none of us are free from oppression. And you see that every day. So how do we continue to lean in and make a true difference? And you're doing just that, even as city here. You're doing just that in the year of service. I've just begun to get thrilled hearing Anaya speak about the work that she's doing and the relationships that she built with students. I mean, it's so important for students to have that advocate. It's so important for students to have someone in their classroom that really touches and cares about them, because they need to see that. They need to know that. Oftentimes, we're constantly peeling layers and telling them what they can and cannot do, and this is the direction that you should go in. But when do we work on the systems that are creating these inequities, so that kids can have the freedom to be kids, to learn in a peaceful environment, to make sure that they're doing all they can to thrive, and we're helping them do that and helping to guide them in that light. So I'm really excited because I know that somewhere there are people just like you, we're coming together and working to solve some of these systemic problems in our education systems. And we'll get there. Eventually we'll get there, but it takes layers. It takes years and years of peeling back those layers, which is what we're doing now.
I totally agree. And it takes the community, like you mentioned, all of these different sectors, all of these different people. Even the thought of coming together to work towards this makes me excited. And I think you too, and probably Anaya. So thank you for that. So Anaya, real quick, through your experience with City Year, what do you feel you've learned or will be able to carry forward as an equity practitioner?
Ooh, I just love this conversation. This is beautiful. I would say, honestly, from the founding stories to like just the morals of City Year, I see it bleeding through like everything since graduation. And it's truly mind-boggling to me that it's been a year since I finished my service year. But moving forward, I know that it truly changed how I saw, I don't want to say life exactly, but what I wanted out of life. It for me, in my Lacey plans, in life after City Year plans, I'm sorry, I know we get bogged down with acronyms, but I'm gonna try and keep myself in tune. But it really did change. Like I said, but from the beginning, I'm an aspiring diplomat and a child advocacy attorney. That came from my work in City Year. I was in a mentor group last year for the entire 12 months of the year. So it actually went a little bit further than City Year did because we ended in July. And my mentor told me in the end that she's like, I've seen a change in how you approach this. It was a pre-law mentor group all over the nation. And when I came in, I was like, okay, yeah, criminal law, entertainment law, this is what I know I want to do. And yeah, I was like, oh, I'll do some pro bono work around like organizations that support kids. In the end, I knew that I was like, I won't be fulfilled if I'm not combining both my passion and love for making sure that Ms. Adair, I think you said it perfectly, was saying like allowing kids to be kids. That is one of my biggest goals in life. My younger brothers would definitely attest to this. Like as a big sister, I've always stepped in. I want them to be kids, the opportunity as particularly young Black men to enjoy that moment in life because it doesn't come back. And at the realm of education, that's exactly where you should be allowed to just thrive and learn and take advantage of all that the world has for you and not be pigeonholed into a place where you're seen as one thing, taught one thing, and expected to be one thing. And so I think that just City Year allows, like anyone who goes through a service year in general, but I think particularly with City Year, I think you learn certain tactics that you can put in any industry. And I think that you can't come out of it not being compassionate and not being empathetic to just what life serves and understanding how valuable it is to be so adaptable, to be someone who can come in and go with the flow, but also have a plan and also have a mission and have a vision that keeps you focused and keeps you grounded and understanding what you do it for and who you do it for. There's just no bounds of where you can go from there. So I think the City Year experience is so special in the essence that I know people who are continuing in education. I know people who have gone on to law school and med school, and they're using exactly what we were doing. And quite frankly, I've known people in cohorts before me, and that also just seeing what they're doing and seeing things now, like now that I know, I'm like, that's a City Year trait. That's something from City Year. And it's like beautiful to see the growth because if more people did City Year, if more people did service years, there would be no telling of all the problems we could solve, all the issues that would no longer be so problematic in our society, because we would have forward-minded thinking people who are open-hearted and open-minded, willing to make the sacrifice and willing to make the change.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, especially in terms of national service. You know, I 100% agree that it is just such a invaluable experience. Like every single, you know, young person should experience something like this, should do a service year, should go out into the communities and do some sort of, you know, helping out, you know, maybe giving back, whatever it is. Because like you were mentioning, I think it does help individuals honing on their why, which is what we kind of focus on a lot at City Year. You know, why are we here? Why do we do this? And it is because the students in these communities deserve the support, right? And I think a City Year, like a really big trait of a City Year core member is sticking to that why within yourself. So that's why you'll see someone go to med school and focus on maybe lower income communities, or go to law school and become a civil rights lawyer or something like that. Yeah, so thank you for that. That was really awesome. So Tonya, I was wondering, what are the long-term consequences if we ignore diversity and inclusion in schools in Detroit and beyond?
So what I want to say, it's hard to ignore. To completely ignore, it means you're not even human at this point, because there are some things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. I think what we deal with mostly now is not necessarily ignoring, but the superficially addressing issues, or superficially just putting a Band-Aid on issues, and versus finding root causes and deeply embedding yourself in developing solutions. Generally, the lack of representation is what really kind of leads to that misunderstanding, the skewed perspectives. We can't move forward without acknowledging where we are. The foundation would be too weak to build a solid structure on, and the voices of children and all people would not be represented. It is so important to have diversity of thought at the table when making decisions. It's so important to have the diverse perspectives at the table when making decisions, because there's a quote that says, do nothing about me without me. Having the lived experiences, the voices of those that are impacted by all of the things that are happening, having that lived experience is important. But also having the powers that be at the table, the philanthropy at the table, having everybody at the table. You've got to have that diversity of thought so that we can get to real solutions when we're finding root causes for situations. Acknowledging leads to superficial acknowledgement. It leads to surface level engagement and responses, and often will not lead to changing the status quo. Truthfully, our nation will not survive much longer unless we begin to accept and embrace differences and become more inclusive in society first and foremost. And then that is reflected in our schools. We've got to engage in the tough conversations and address root causes to see real change happen. I think that's happening now, particularly now after COVID and after all of we've seen with the George Floyd murder. There's more conversations that are happening. There's more tough conversations are happening, and it's not comfortable, but yet it's necessary. And so having those tough conversations and really having the diversity of thought at the table helps us to get to the solutions that we need to see that's going to change the status quo and truly change the course of our nation as a whole. We either do that or we risk losing our kids, our most prized possessions, our young people, our children, and that we can't afford to lose our young people in the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was incredible. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing and highlighting some of the challenges that the public school system is facing. We have about 15 to 20 minutes left, and I would love to offer this time to our audience to have the opportunity to ask Tonya and Anaya some questions within the chat. So please feel free to add your questions and I'll read them out to our panelists. We have, again, about 10-15 minutes left, or 15-20 minutes left, so we definitely have some time for some good questions. Okay, there's one here that says, as a parent, what can you do to foster equity in your child's education? It's a great question. To either Tanya or Anaya.
I get started. I am a parent of 3 young men. They are adults now. But definitely one of the things that I try to do as a parent, I know I made mistakes, but one of the things that I tried to do was always be an advocate for my children, being an advocate for what's right, making sure that I was also teaching them at home, and I was also instilling in them what they are able to do, and not have them take on the bias comments and all of the things that were reflected on them, making sure that I was teaching them how not to have those biases, how to love everybody, how to welcome everybody, how to respect everyone and what everyone brings to the table. And so as a parent, you have to be that advocate for your child. You have to speak up. Sometimes when that child can't speak up for themselves, you have to be that person to always push for and foster inequity within your child's education, because it doesn't always come natural. There are things that are happening within schools that sometimes kids will slip through the crack. You have to make sure that that's not your child. First and foremost, cover your kids and make sure that you are helping to teach them and helping to educate them on what they should expect even in schools. As a principal, I had a parent group that came in and even did observations in the classroom. And periodically, every quarter, they would come in and we would walk around and they would just talk about what they saw in classrooms and come back and debrief. And then they would turn around and volunteer to help improve some of the things that they were seeing in classrooms. So just being that parent that's always there. I know it's sometimes hard to be a volunteer at your child's school, but doing that and make sure you're always abreast of what's going on in the schools is going to be important as a parent.
Yeah, thank you. We have another one here that says, when educational inequity feels too big to change, what do you do to keep yourself centered? And I'd appreciate if both of you could answer this one.
I'll start. I think this is honestly one of the biggest issues on any forefront or movement that you're going to deal with, is because burnout is real. Self-care is important. However, making a big goal into smaller goals and not knowing, and also knowing that you are not alone in the fight and that you don't have to do everything, but in each season and era of your life, or what you can do to serve that movement is going to look different. And in educational inequity, this is not a short road. It hasn't been, it won't be, it is a continuous fight. The educational system at home and abroad is something that is going to continue to need people. So understanding that there are different organizations, if you can't do a service year, if you can't give up a year or 6 months of your time, if you're a working individual, because it is a modest stipend that you get, even for young people. I understand personally, I come from a low socioeconomic background. Had my family not supported me in doing this, which at first they did not, city year was very close to not being a possibility. So I understand in the essence of different parts of your life it's going to stretch you differently. But understanding that there are organizations that do this work every year, every day, volunteering where you can, going to your school board meetings, working, there are schools in every neighborhood, seeing where they need help, seeing what parts that they what is lacking, what, especially now in this current climate. I'll tell you, from my district, there's at least 30 requests for subs every week. If that's not something, Teacher Appreciation Week, just showing people that are doing the work, that you care and that you see them and that they're not doing this for naught. Understanding that even the kids in your teach them to appreciate, teach them to go up, to show up, to do what they need to do. There are parent boards, there are community advocates, understanding that you can also write your representatives. I'm a big component of holding your representatives accountable. They work for you. And that goes from the local to the federal level, like continuously working through people, and also making the sacrifice to take the time yourself to do the little things that you can, or donate. If that is something, like my mom always says, that like there are people who can write a check. That's their thing. They're not an on the boost type of person. If you're a hands-on person, be a hands-on person. If you're a check person, write the check. Funding is very important too. And so understanding where you fall in this movement is important, but also understanding that changes. So don't also hold yourselves accountable to being like, oh, this is what I've always done. Sometimes you have to pass that baton, understanding that you can't do that in this moment in time of your life is okay. Taking care of yourself is important because we're gonna need you again.
I agree with everything Naya has said. Another piece to that is, for me, it was understanding my why. I was a high school student who struggled in high school because I was moved to, there was a redistricting school, and we were moved to a school where there was predominantly white. I struggled because of things that happened during the school. I was kicked off of student council because I was reading a magazine. I was told by my guidance counselor that college is not for you. Don't even worry about going. You just need to go find you a job after high school. So my purpose for becoming an educator was to make sure that more kids did not receive the experiences that I received. I wanted to make things different for the next generation, and I stuck to that. That was my why, and I made sure that every child that I served as a teacher, as a assistant principal, as a principal, and even at the district level, I consistently advocated for what was right for kids. No one should have the opportunity to tell a child what they can and cannot do. So that was my passion. That was the thing that really got me going, was when I heard a guidance counselor tell a kid, well, we're going to take you over here to this, to the community college because, you know, that's what's acceptable for you. No, you let the kid decide. You provide all the options, you provide the opportunities, you provide the access and allow them to decide. So understanding your why is going to be key. Understanding your purpose is going to be really key. And then consistency, making sure everything that you do is about meeting that purpose and really getting to the why you're doing this. Because if you don't have a why you're in this work, if you don't understand why you're doing this, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard regardless, but understanding that if you know why you're doing it, if you have a purpose for doing this, it's the right thing to do, because every kid, every child deserves the opportunity to be successful. Every child deserves the opportunity to have someone advocating for them. It's just really important to me, and that consistency is always going to be the key, to make sure that you remain consistent. Even in this role, I'm working with school districts, even now, consistently still advocating for kids, because I want to make sure kids have a different experience than what I had as a kid.
Beautiful.
So, Allie, if I can add one more thing to that, finding a community is super important. Like understanding your why, and somebody also, an accountability partner, if that's all you have, is like to remind you of your why, is a beautiful thing that will take you far. I love that we have the greater cohort and the grander cohort at City Air, but then we also have our teams that we see on a daily basis that can remind you, hey, when we started, this is where you were. Or, hey, I know today was a rough day, because I know it was a rough day for me. And at Project Central Dursley, I'm just going to throw that out there, best team there is. But we had 3 different schools. We had elementary, a middle, and a high school on our team. And so having people that also like you can just lean on, that see differently, or not, they aren't exactly in the same space that you're in, but that understand you and that get your why, and that can remind you, hey, we're in this together, is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And also a huge shout out to, I'm not sure if we actually got an official name, but just like the different affinity groups that we had, it was a lifesaver on so many occasions, and just being like, just days that I was like, I didn't even think that I would need this, but who would know that like Black Card Revolt would have got me through the week? Had no idea, but like that light moment to understand that like a lot of the things that we deal with in addressing educational equity is going to be heavy and hard hitting, but in some moments it can be light and it can be joyous as well.
Oh, thank you both. So we got the why, we got the consistency, we got the community, and I think that we can see that here just within this meeting. So it's really quite an honor to be a part of this board right now. So real quick, I think we have one last question in the chat. If you guys don't mind, maybe looking at this, it says, interested in how you would frame a service year opportunity like City Year or maybe another national opportunity to young people who may not have the privilege or mindset in putting a year like instead of traditional employment, so stipend versus salary. And I know, you touched a little bit on this, if you want to say anything else.
So I would say level with them. Don't, if you're having a direct conversation with someone, if it's not like a graphic or something they're just putting out there. For me, the touching part was being to someone else what someone was for me. Being that I had the opportunity to go to those private schools, and I was always a scholarship kid. And I got a full ride to go to college, and I went to a top 15 school in the nation. So it really was like understanding that it's not always giving back. In my case, I did come back home, but sometimes it's really passing it forward and understanding that it's not impossible, and it's not, I won't say it's not hard. I will not say that some days there's a little bit of a sacrifice. You might not be drinking Starbucks, but the community, the network, the love, and just the general care about your well-being. I can honestly say that the other jobs that I was going to take and that were giving me a salary weren't going to take care of me the way the City Year took care of me. It truly is a family. It truly is, and there's something about serving that like literally it serves back, because it gives to your soul what money just simply can't buy. And I understand that it is sometimes very difficult to have this conversation with people. But when you come through with honesty and genuine and truth, and if you have that rapport with them, there's not much more that can convince someone. It truly just comes down to like knowing that this is something that is so worthwhile.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's really kind of, bottling up and sharing it with the world. We're definitely going to take this recording and just put it everywhere. But I think it's like that investment within the community. And it's also investment in yourself at the same time. So while you might not be getting the most money in the world, a lot of that experience professionally and personally and all that growth, I think is really pays off at the end of the day. But yeah, thank you, Anaya. That was absolutely amazing. And thank you, Tonya. So this is actually, I think, those are the last questions in the chat. So I would just like to thank you all for listening, participating, and learning more about how we can foster equity in education. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic or how you can become a City Year Core member, like Anaya, please click the link. There will be one in the chat, and you can fill out an interest form, and someone like me will reach out to you, and we can continue this conversation and see whether or not City Year is an option for you. But biggest thank you to Tonya and Anaya. This was absolutely amazing. Hopefully we can do this again, maybe a little bit later in the fall or something, but I'd love to just continue this conversation. And again, to all of our participants here today, City Year loves to have conversations like these. So reach out to me, reach out to anyone, go to cityyear.org. fill out some things, and we'll be in contact with you about, all of these great things that we've talked about today. But if there's no more chats or anything like that, questions, I think we're good to go. So thank you all again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tonya.